You feel that tap, then a solid thump. Your heart jumps. You reel down fast, feel the weight of the fish, and you swing back with everything you've got, ready to battle a giant. Your rod doubles over, and then your line goes completely slack. What just happened? Today we're talking about a hard truth. Is it possible your hook set is actually too powerful? I'm going to show you why that monster hook set you learned as a kid might be the #1 reason you're missing fish. I promise that by the end of this video, you will look at setting the hook in a completely new way. And I'll bet what I'm about to say goes against everything your grandpa ever told you about fishing. Think a hard, aggressive hook set is always better? Let's argue about it in the comments right now, before we even start. Look, every angler lives for that explosive moment of the hook set. It's the punctuation mark at the end of a long, patient sentence. It's the explosion of action after the quiet waiting. And for generations, we've all been taught the same thing. When you get a bite, cross their eyes, or set it like you mean it. We've all seen the pros on television do it, a huge sweeping motion that looks incredibly effective and powerful. It feels right, it feels authoritative, and when it does work, it's one of the most satisfying feelings in fishing. So for years, we just keep doing it, never questioning if there's a better way. We blame a missed fish on a short strike, or the fish being finicky, but we almost never blame our own technique. That powerful habit is so deeply ingrained that we don't even consider it could be the source of the problem. Let's start by painting a classic scene. It's early morning. The fog is just lifting off the water, and everything is quiet. You make a perfect cast right next to a submerged log where you just know a big one is waiting. You feel that unmistakable tick-tick thump of a bass picking up your plastic worm. The adrenaline starts to pump. This is the moment you've been waiting for. You reel down, get all the slack out of your line, and then you unleash a hook set that could probably pull a boat anchor out of the mud. Your rod bends double for a split second. A huge splash erupts on the surface, and then, absolutely nothing. Your lure comes flying back at your head, completely clean. You check the hook point. It's still razor sharp. So what just happened? This exact scenario plays out on lakes and rivers every single day. The angler does everything right according to the old rule book, but the result is a missed opportunity. It's frustrating, confusing, and it makes you doubt your gear and your spot. But the answer is often hiding in plain sight, in the sheer violence of the hook set itself. We've been conditioned to believe that more force equals a better connection. But the physics of what's happening underwater tell a very different and much more surprising story. Now, let's get honest about where we learned to set the hook. For most of us, it was from our dad, our grandpa, or an older uncle standing on the bank. They'd say something like, "You gotta rip his lips off," or "Make sure he knows he's hooked." This advice comes from a good place, and it's rooted in a completely different era of fishing. You have to think about the gear they were using back then. They had thick, heavy monofilament line that had the stretch of a rubber band. They used big, soft fiberglass rods that were like wet noodles compared to today's crisp graphite models. And the hooks themselves were often thick and not nearly as sharp. With that kind of old-school setup, you absolutely needed a powerful, sweeping, almost violent hook set just to overcome all the line stretch, bend the soft rod, and finally drive that duller hook point home. It was a complete necessity born from the limitations of their equipment. The problem is, our gear has evolved light years beyond that, but the old-school advice has stuck around like a bad habit. We're applying Stone Age techniques to Space Age technology, and the results are predictably inconsistent and often disappointing. This brings us to the modern gear problem. Let's take a close look at what you're likely holding in your hands on the water today. You probably have a high-modulus graphite rod that is incredibly stiff, light, and sensitive. You're using a line like braid or fluorocarbon, which has virtually zero stretch, and your hooks are no longer just sharpened. They are chemically sharpened to a needle point that is almost impossibly sharp. When you combine these three modern marvels, a stiff rod, a no-stretch line, and a surgical-grade hook, that old-school, rip-their-lips-off hook set becomes massive, catastrophic overkill. It's like using a sledgehammer to hang a small picture frame. The force you generate is instantaneous and immense. There's no longer any cushion from line stretch or a soft rod to absorb that initial shock. All of that violent energy is transferred directly to the hook point inside the fish's mouth in a tiny fraction of a second. This isn't a gradual seating of the hook. It's a sudden explosive event that does more harm than good. And that's precisely where our main issue begins. We're not just setting the hook anymore. We're performing a high-speed underwater extraction without the fish's consent. So, what is actually happening inside the fish's mouth during one of these overly aggressive hook sets? Let's visualize it. A fish, like a bass, inhales your lure. The hook is inside its mouth, which is made of membrane and soft tissue, not steel. When you unleash that massive hook set with your no-stretch line and stiff rod, you are yanking that hook with incredible speed and force. Instead of the hook point catching tissue and burying itself, it acts like a blade. It tears a path. Think about trying to poke a hole in a piece of paper. If you push a pin in slowly, you make a small, clean hole. If you try to stab it as hard and fast as you can, you're more likely to rip a huge gash in the paper. The same principle applies here. The extreme force creates a large tear or hole in the fish's mouth, and the hook is often pulled right back out through that same hole it just created. The fish never had a chance to be hooked properly. You feel the weight for a split second. That's the hook tearing tissue. And then it's gone. That's the feeling of a pulled hook, not a missed strike. Let's dive deeper into the physics of the pivot. A fish hook is designed to work on a pivot. When pressure is applied, the point is supposed to grab, and the rest of the hook then rotates, or pivots, to drive the barb deep into the jawbone or tougher cartilage for a secure hold. This process takes a fraction of a second, but it's not instantaneous. It needs a moment for the point to catch and for the rotation to complete. A violent lightning-fast hook set can completely bypass this crucial mechanical step. The force is so immediate and linear that the hook doesn't have time to pivot properly. Instead of rotating and digging in, it just gets pulled straight out in the direction of the force. Imagine trying to hammer a nail sideways instead of straight on. You're just scraping the surface. You might feel that initial thump as the point momentarily snags, but because it never pivoted to lock in, it just pulls free. A proper hook set is more of a strong, deliberate pull or sweep than a whip-crack-like jerk. That controlled speed gives the hook the critical time it needs to do its job and rotate into place. The type of fish you are targeting makes a huge difference here. Let's talk about a classic example. Crappie. Anglers call their mouths paper mouths, for a very good reason. The membrane is incredibly thin and delicate. If you use a base-style, cross-their-eyes hook set on a crappie, you are going to fail 9 times out of 10. You will literally rip the hook right through their mouth before you even know what happened. The same goes for many species of trout. They have softer mouths that can't withstand that kind of shock. For these fish, the hook set should be little more than a firm lift of the rod tip while you start reeling. You simply need to apply steady pressure. A largemouth bass, on the other hand, has a much tougher, bonier mouth. It can handle more force, especially if you're trying to drive a thick, weedless hook through a plastic bait. But even with a bass, the principle remains the same. The goal is hook penetration, not tissue destruction. The amount of force should be adjusted based on the species, the bait, and the gear, but maximum force is almost never the right answer. Let's consider the lure you're using. A one-size-fits-all hook set is a recipe for disaster. Think about the difference between a single hook lure like a jig or a Texas-rigged worm, and a lure with treble hooks like a crankbait or a topwater plug. With a jig, you often have to drive a single thick-gauge hook through a plastic trailer and into the hard part of a fish's jaw. This does require a firm, solid hook set. However, it still needs to be a powerful pull or sweep, not a violent jerk. You are loading the rod and driving the hook home with pressure. Now, contrast that with a crankbait. It has 2 or 3 small, thin-wire treble hooks. The fish often hooks itself just by biting down and turning. If you then apply a massive, jarring hook set, you risk ripping those small hooks right out. You can also create too much slack by moving the rod so far, allowing a thrashing fish to throw the lure. For treble hook baits, the best hook set is often to just keep reeling and use a long sweeping motion to one side to maintain pressure and let the rod do the work. Using a jig hook set on a crankbait is a classic way to lose fish. The action of your fishing rod plays a massive role in this equation. Rod action describes how much of the rod bends when you put pressure on the tip. A fast action rod bends mostly in the top third, making it very sensitive and allowing for quick, powerful hook sets. A moderate or slow action rod bends much further down, closer to the middle of the blank. This slower, more parabolic bend acts as a shock absorber. This is why most professional crankbait anglers use moderate action fiberglass or composite rods. That slower action prevents them from ripping the small treble hooks out of the fish's mouth. It provides a cushion. If you are using a very fast or extra fast action rod, which is common for worm and jig fishing, you have to be even more conscious of how hard you are setting the hook. That stiff rod transfers energy with brutal efficiency. You don't need a huge wind-up and swing. A short, sharp wrist snap or a firm pull is often all it takes to drive the hook home. You have to let the rod do its job and not try to overpower an already powerful tool. We've touched on it, but let's focus on the line. The difference between monofilament, fluorocarbon, and braid is night and day when it comes to setting the hook. Monofilament, the old standard, has a significant amount of stretch. It can stretch up to 25% or more. This stretch acts like a bungee cord, absorbing the shock of a hard hook set. This is why your grandpa could get away with those huge sweeping hook sets. He had to in order to pick up all that stretch. Now consider braided line. Braid has virtually zero stretch. When you set the hook with braid, the connection is immediate and unforgiving. There is no shock absorption whatsoever. Fluorocarbon is somewhere in between, with low stretch but not zero. If you switch from mono to braid and don't change your hook set, you will start pulling the lure away from fish constantly. You'll feel bites and miss them over and over. With braid, your hook set needs to be much more compact and controlled. The simple act of reeling down and pulling back firmly is often more than enough force to get the job done. The line does the work for you. So, what does a good hook set actually look like? Let's imagine it in slow motion. The fish takes the lure. You feel the bite. The first move is not to swing, but to reel. You reel down quickly to remove any slack from the line until you feel the weight of the fish. This is the most critical step. Setting the hook on a slack line is like trying to punch through a pillow. All your energy is wasted. Once you feel the fish's weight, your motion should be a strong and continuous pull, not a sudden jerk. For a single hook, think of it as a sweep. You can sweep the rod up or to the side. The key is that you are loading the rod blank and using its power to drive the hook home. It's a fluid motion that starts strong and continues as you begin fighting the fish. It's less of a set and more of a drive. You are driving that hook into place with sustained pressure. This controlled power ensures the hook point finds purchase and pivots correctly without tearing an escape hatch for the fish. It's about being efficient, not violent. This brings me to my next point, which is the reel set technique. For certain presentations, especially with moving baits or finesse tactics, the reel set is the most effective method, and it perfectly illustrates the concept of controlled force. Instead of a dramatic rod swing, you simply start reeling very fast and hard, while simultaneously pulling the rod back in a smooth, sweeping motion. The combination of the reel's power and the steady pull of the rod is enough to sink the hook without any violent jerking. This is extremely effective for baits with small hooks, for fish with soft mouths, or when you're using light line. It keeps constant tension on the fish from the absolute first second, which is critical. There's no moment of slack created by a huge, uncontrolled rod swing. It feels less dramatic, for sure. You won't get that classic TV hook set moment, but your landing ratio will go up significantly. It's a prime example of technique over brute force, and it works incredibly well once you get the hang of it. How can you actually practice a better hook set? It feels weird to practice something that happens so fast, but you can build muscle memory. One of the best ways is to have a friend help you on dry land. Have them hold the end of your line, with a glove, of course, and walk about a cast length away. Close your eyes and have them give a slight tug on the line to simulate a bite. Your job is to practice that motion. Reel down to feel the tension, and then perform a smooth, powerful sweep instead of a jerky snap. Feel how the rod loads up and how little movement it actually takes to create immense pressure at the end of the line, especially with braid. Another great way is to simply be more mindful on the water. Before you make a cast, tell yourself out loud, on the next bite, I will sweep, not jerk. By consciously thinking about it before it happens, you can start to overwrite that old, ingrained, adrenaline-fueled reaction. It takes deliberate practice to break a habit you've had for decades. Another part of this is learning to properly read the bite. Not every tap or tick on your line is a fish trying to eat your lure. Sometimes it's just a fish bumping it with its mouth closed, or you're dragging it over a rock or a branch. If you unleash a full-power hook set on every single little tick you feel, you're going to be yanking the lure away from fish that were just about to commit. A classic bass bite on a worm is often a tick, followed by a pause, and then a feeling of mushy weight, or the line starting to swim away. That mushy weight is the fish actually holding the lure in its mouth. That is your signal to set the hook. Learning to wait that extra split second to confirm you feel the weight of the fish, rather than just the initial tap, is a game changer. It ensures the lure is fully in the fish's mouth, and you're not just snatching it away prematurely. Patience, even for just half a second, can be the difference between a hookup and a miss. Let's bust a myth. We often see professional anglers on television deliver what looks like an incredibly violent hook set, and then they land a giant fish. So what gives? Are they doing it wrong? Not necessarily, but you have to understand the context. First, they are often fishing in extremely heavy cover, thick grass, dense wood, and they need to get that fish's head turned and moving out of that cover immediately, or the fight is over before it begins. The hook set is also part of pulling the fish away from snags. Second, they are often using very specialized gear, like a heavy-action flipping stick and 65-pound braid, designed for exactly that kind of work. They have matched their technique to the specific situation. The mistake amateur anglers make is copying that one specific high-power hook set and applying it to every situation, like fishing a small crankbait in open water. That's like using a race car to go get groceries. It's the wrong tool and the wrong technique for the job. Don't just copy what you see. Understand why they are doing it. Overcoming the mental game is probably the hardest part of this entire process. The adrenaline rush when you get a big bite is a powerful thing. Your instincts scream at you to react with maximum speed and force. It's a primal response. To change this, you have to actively fight that instinct. You have to train yourself to take a deep breath, figuratively of course, and focus on the technique. Remind yourself that a controlled, powerful pull is more effective than a wild, uncontrolled swing. One trick that helps is to focus on your hips and core. Instead of thinking about swinging with your arms and shoulders, think about rotating your torso, like a baseball player swinging a bat in slow motion. This engages your larger muscles and naturally creates a more powerful, less jerky sweep of the rod. It turns a spastic arm movement into a controlled full-body motion. This mental shift is key. You're not trying to be less powerful. You're trying to be more efficient with your power. I remember a specific trip a few years ago that really drove this point home for me. I was fishing with a buddy who was an excellent angler, but he kept missing fish all morning. We were throwing jigs to submerged trees. I'd hear him get a bite, then hear this huge whoosh sound as he swung for the fences, followed by an angry curse word. He must have missed 5 or 6 fish in a row. I was using the same jig and catching fish. Finally, I watched him closely. His hook sets were monumental, epic swings. On his next bite, I just said, "This time, just reel down and pull." He looked at me like I was crazy, but he did it. He felt the bite, he started reeling fast, and just gave the rod a firm 2-foot pull to the side. The rod loaded up, and he was hooked up to a nice 4-pounder. He looked at me with total shock on his face. He had been so focused on hitting them hard that he was literally pulling the jig out of their mouths before they could get it properly. Seeing that light bulb go on for him was proof of how a small change can make a massive difference. The shape of the hook you use can also influence how you should set it. Think about a traditional J-hook or a straight shank flipping hook. These designs require a good amount of force in a straight line to penetrate. The point is aligned with the hook eye. In contrast, an extra wide gap, or EWG hook, has a much different design. The point is offset and sits back from the eye. When you set an EWG hook, it needs to pop out from the plastic bait and then find purchase. A hard, fast jerk can sometimes cause the bait to ball up on the hook or not allow the point to engage properly. A steady, powerful pull often works better with EWG hooks, as it allows the hook to slide into position and pivot correctly. It's a subtle difference, but it matters. Knowing your equipment, right down to the shape of the hook, allows you to tailor your hook set for maximum efficiency. It's another layer of the game that separates good anglers from great ones. The hook set should match the hook. Believe it or not, a bad hook set has a distinct sound and feel. A good solid hook set feels like you've hooked a log. It's a heavy, solid connection. You feel the weight of the fish and the power of the rod loading up. A bad hook set, one where you pull the hook out, often has a thwack or pop feeling to it. You feel the fish for a split second, there's a moment of intense pressure, and then it suddenly lets go. It doesn't feel like the fish just spit the hook. It feels like something tore free. Sometimes you'll even reel in your bait and find a single fish scale stuck on the hook point. That is the smoking gun. That scale is absolute proof that your hook point made contact, started to penetrate, and then was ripped free by excessive force, scraping a scale off on its way out. If you ever see that, it is a 100% sign that you need to dial back the power on your hook set. The evidence is literally right there on your hook. Here's a simple test you can do at home or by the water to feel the difference. Tie your line to something with a little bit of give, like a flimsy tree branch or even a piece of cardboard. First, try your old hook set. Stand back and give it a huge, violent jerk. Notice how it feels, the shock, the jarring impact. Now try the new method. Reel down until the line is tight, and then perform a long, smooth, and powerful sweep of the rod, like you're pulling the object toward you. Feel how the rod bends and loads up. Feel the sustained, heavy pressure. That second feeling is what you want. That is the feeling of controlled power that drives a hook home securely. The first feeling, that violent jerk, is the feeling that tears holes and loses fish. Doing this simple exercise a few times can help retrain your brain and your body to understand what the right kind of force actually feels like through the rod. It can be a real eye-opener. So let's put this all together into the new technique. The next time you're on the water and you feel that bite, I want you to follow these 3 steps. Step 1. Do not swing immediately. Your first reaction should be to start reeling to pick up any slack in the line. This is the most important step. Step 2. As you reel, lower your rod tip slightly toward the water to ensure you have room for the hook set. Continue reeling until you can feel the unmistakable weight of the fish on the end of the line. You're making a positive connection before you apply power. Step 3. Instead of a violent jerk, execute a firm, sweeping pull. This can be straight up over your head or, even better, a long sweep to the side. Think of it as pulling the rod a distance of about 3 to 4 feet with accelerating speed. You are using the whole rod, not just your wrists, to drive the hook home with immense but controlled pressure. That's it. Reel, feel, and sweep. It's a simple, repeatable process that relies on the engineering of your gear, not on brute explosive force. This is the path to landing more fish. So, let's bring it all together. For years, many of us, myself included, have been told that a harder hook set is a better hook set. We've put our backs into it, believing we were ensuring a solid connection. But as we've seen, with modern graphite rods, no stretch lines, and chemically sharpened hooks, that extreme force isn't just unnecessary, it's actively working against you. The biggest aha moment, the real turning point, is realizing that a fish's mouth isn't a block of wood. It's soft tissue. By swinging for the fences, you're not driving the hook deeper. You are often creating a huge hole and then pulling the hook right back out of it before it can even pivot and find a home. The most powerful feeling hook set is often the one that results in a lost fish. This simple shift in thinking, from a violent rip to a firm, fast sweep, can fundamentally change your landing ratio. You'll stop wondering about short strikes and start boating more of the fish that bite. Thank you so much for watching and for being open to challenging some old-school wisdom. If this video made you rethink your hook set, do me a favor and hit that like button and be sure to subscribe for more tips that will genuinely make you a better angler. Now, I have to ask, and I want your honest answer. Are you a rip-their-lips-off hook setter, or have you already switched to a more controlled pull? Let me know your stories and your habits in the comments below. Let's talk about it.